This is a session on what it takes to become a node operator. For those of you who are considering or already have a node in Mainnet, it might be a refresher for you guys in that case, if you're already running something. But if you're considering becoming part of the next batch of node operators that are permitted to be added to the network, hopefully this session will give you everything you need to know. So you know what's ahead of you, what materials you'll need, and what that timeline will look like. So first a refresher. This is the basic architecture of the systems that are in play in the network. And so we have a whole bunch of services that the Velocity network provides, primarily around the registration of organizations and the ability to search over those that are registered on the network. You obviously have the holder app, which you've seen demonstrated by John earlier today. And then finally, the other major piece, or major pieces that we provide are the blockchain node, we're going to talk about a bit more, and the credential agent itself. The agent is effectively this smart proxy handling the protocols for issuing for you on your behalf when you integrate it into your proprietary applications. And it's also communicating to the blockchain nodes that we have. And as you can see here, they are communicating with each other. It's a very simplistic version of what is going on.
What is an agent wallet?
An agent wallet, this is just the keys that it's custodying. So part of typically when you deploy at the moment, that will be encrypted keys that are stored on the Mongo database, requires a Mongo database. In the near future, we'll be adding KMS support as well. So effectively just keep it.
Usually keyman.
Andres, you're going to go deep on it.
Oh, a few more people.
You double in size.
Okay. So, just to refresh, just going over quickly the technical architecture. Oh, that was too fast to get going. Too impatient.
You were diligent and on time. This is from Australia.
Oh, sure.
In this section,
Yes.
Ah. You missed my great intro before. I started too early. You guys, everyone's late. All right, I'll start again. Right, so this is a session on becoming a node operator. Some of you are already node operators, but many in this room, yeah.
who are you?
I'm Andres. Andres, CTO of Velocity Career Labs and head of product of Velocity Network Foundation. Yeah, so everything. Okay. Oh, God.
So it was 4 years ago, and I wrote a 32 pages white paper on Velocity Network, right? The entire whole book, all the transactions, all the compliance things, everything, tokenomics, everything. And then we started hiring, and we hired a CTO. And for 6 months, he just looked at that white paper and didn't know what to do with it. Right? It was so complicated. And then we hired another CTO. And again, 6 months back, and he was just completely lost. Right? It's so complicated. And then I met Andres. I was introduced to Andres. Met at a coffee shop. Came with shorts and what was it? Sneakers. And I thought, who's this guy? Right? It's an interview. Why do you go? And for some reason, I felt that that's the mad scientist that we need here. And he was the only one, right, that was able to take that huge vision and put it into architecture, cryptography. And he's an amazing guy. Really an amazing guy.
Yeah. Bad at introducing myself, but luckily I have Drew. Yeah, so we're going to go through what it takes to run a node on Mainnet in about 25 minutes. I'll see if I can do that. So as I was going through earlier, there's a number of different modules that we're producing, or mainly, most of these are open source and royalty free, except for the Holder app itself. But we do have Velocity Network Services. This is where organizations get registered onto the network and become available for being able to be searched, and also their elements of their identity are put into these databases, so that when an individual is checking information or other participants are checking information about that organization, they have a location to verify those identities using cryptography. We have the Holder app, which John demonstrated earlier today, and you'll all be using it in about an hour to claim your badges. We have the agent, which is essentially, in my technical jargon, what I like to say is a smart proxy. This is something that's handling the communications, all the protocols for issuing and disclosure of credentials to your existing systems, which are on the right-hand side here. It also is interfacing with the blockchain, which is exactly the piece. This particular node is what we're going to be really talking about in this session, and what it takes to run one of these things, and what's going on, and what will be, if you decide to come on board, what's your timeline going to look like? What are the materials that you'll need for becoming a node operator? So, on that previous slide, we just had two of these blockchain nodes talking to each other, but really what we already have is 28 of them in the current network. And we're looking to open up a new window of opportunity for new node operators to come on board to increase the size of that network. That network is already one of the largest, if not the largest, in self-sovereign identity anyway. And just to give you guys that opportunity to get some of the benefits that it comes with running a node. So by running a node, you're helping improve the integrity of the network and add redundancy into the network. That's why we want it. If you're running a credential agent, additionally, if we go back to this slide, if you're running a credential agent, it means you can talk to your local node, which will be the fastest. So there is a performance consideration here as well. Otherwise, you just connect to your closest that you have around you.
So can the credential agent also be installed on the node?
I mean, you can co-locate it if you like, but I'm not sure if your security teams will be happy with that. The ports that are required to be open, there's certain security considerations around that. That mean it's very different from your typical services that you'd be deploying with HTTP being exposed. So your security teams will probably say no. Okay, so blockchain, I mean, this is blockchain 101. Hopefully this makes sense. Basically, what we have in blockchains, right, we have a whole bunch of transactions. We have the node receiving those transactions, proposing a block to be added to the blockchain, and assuming, or depending on the consensus, what's termed the consensus protocol, right, that proposed block gets added to the chain. And this consensus algorithm, which is really the key for deciding which blocks get added, differs from blockchain to blockchain, right? You will have heard of proof of work, the one that Bitcoin and Ethereum currently use. Perhaps you'll have heard of proof of stake, which is an alternative. So these are the consensus algorithms, and that's really determining which of those nodes that's running on the network actually gets to add the block, the next block with the proposed transactions.
And which protocol are you using?
So we use a Byzantine fault-tolerant algorithm. It's called IBFT2. This tends to be a lot more performant than those traditional consensus protocols that you've heard about from Bitcoin and Ethereum. We can do that because we know all the node operators. This is not a public network, okay? One of the key differences that there is from what you will have been used to from hearing of Bitcoin, you know, any developer can add a new Bitcoin node, right? And start potentially adding blocks and getting coins. In this case, it's not the case. You have to sign legal agreements, and you have to be a known entity within the Velocity Network Foundation, an accepted entity, to run a node. And so we can use this other algorithm called IBFT2. It's far, far more performant than those traditional algorithms. Okay, so what does a node do? It stores a full copy of the data. We'll get into what the data is in the following slide. They validate transactions to make sure that the information that's going on meets the protocol requirements. They are obviously coming to consensus, meaning adding blocks and also getting copies of accepted blocks on the network. So that series of transactions, right? And finally, they agree on world state. So the world state is if you apply those transactions one at a time, kind of like your bank balance, you get to a balance, right? You get to, oh, I've got $3,000 in my bank account. That is what's termed world state in this, within the blockchain ecosystem, particularly within Ethereum, which is what we're using as the basis of our blockchain. What is stored on the ledger? So there are 4 things that are on the ledger. The first is what we call credential metadata. Okay, that's a technical term. What it is very simple. Each credential that gets issued on the network has a unique key that it's been signed with, and the public key. So when we're looking at cryptography, asymmetric cryptography, you have a private and public key. The private key is what's used to sign that data, and the public key is what's used to verify that data. We don't. What we need a copy of on the ledger is that public key. We need to be able to verify those credentials wherever they happen to go. So that's stored, and we also store just an extra piece of metadata, which is the type of credential that got issued. Was it employment? Was it education? Was it a badge, etc.? And this is stored in a highly compressed format because we're going to have a lot of credentials on the system, and it's also encrypted, which means it's not available to just anyone who's snooping on the network. including node operators. The node operators do not know how to decrypt these keys. The reason being is that we don't want every node, just because you're a node operator, you should be able to get access to the keys. It's not secure, and it would compromise the network's tokenomics. Instead, how do you decrypt? You need to have a copy of the credential. Someone has to have shared with you that credential. That individual needs to have shared with you the credential. Only then can you decrypt. Other things that are on the blockchain, we have revocation ledgers. Every credential can get revoked, right? It's a license, it's an education degree. These things can get revoked for a variety of reasons. And as Drew was talking about earlier, and Jim as well, they can also be replaced. There are no updates of credentials. There is only, as soon as it's issued, it cannot be changed ever again. So how do you do updates? Oh, he was working at Velocity Career Labs and he got fired, right? And now he's got a termination date on that credential that he has for his employment. The way we accomplish that is via revocation of that original credential and issuing a new one. So these revocation ledgers, they're very compact as well. They follow a W3C standard and are stored on chain. Permissions, so one of the key, very important things that need to be stored on chain are the security elements. Who's allowed to do what on the network? If you're running a blockchain node, if you're part of consensus, you have higher privileges than if you're running a credential agent operator. And those organizations have much higher privileges than if you're just a regular issuer or verifier. And lastly, we have voucher balances. So if you attended the discussion on payment rewards yesterday, you would have heard about these things called vouchers, and that this is what's required to verify a credential. You need to expend one of these vouchers to be able to verify. Those balances are stored on chain as well. So that verification can be handled fully on chain by any of the nodes. So what does it take to serve as a node operator? So you're going to run a Hyperledger Besu Ethereum client. We currently have, we'll probably increase this number of 15, probably we're looking for around 20. You need to be able to run a tier 4 data center equivalent to ensure that there's the performance, the reliability, security that goes along with those sorts of requirements. The cost is around $3,000 per annum, and you will need to be approved and by the node operating, or by the board of the Velocity Network Foundation. And that goes through the Node Operator Governing Committee, of which Shrikant is a member with me. So why would you want to do this? Why would I want to spend all this money? Well, there's substantial reward. You are earning the vast majority of credits that are available at this point in time in the network. In the first year, which was still within, there's a 2.5% bonus on top of it. Sorry, it's 2.5% of the tokens in circulation at the moment that are available for rewards. And that's going to be dropping year on year, but it's a lot that you can gain, and then that has consequences on governance of the Velocity Network Foundation. So if you want to influence what's happening, it's a really great way to get that influence on the network.
I want to explain this because we haven't talked about this. Every credit has a single vote for everything on the network. Most important are the board members. So every year, the board gets re-elected, And the elections are weighted against how many credits, tokens, you've earned and kept in the ecosystem. So if SAP, for example, will have 1 billion credits, SAP can choose and vote for whatever board member they would like to put in the board. Same goes to any other. So essentially, it creates a situation where the biggest contributors to the network at any given time, right, are influencing on the network the most.
So, and it is a, I'll just go on to the next slide. There is status also associated with that, right? So you become a velocity steward, as it's called, and so you can position yourselves as contributing to, the Internet of Careers, the largest SSI blockchain network that there is.
Say that again, please.
Which bit?
What's the largest SSI network?
Ours, Velocity Network. So what do you need? Okay, so now it's going to get really technical, right? Because half this audience is pretty technical. So what do you need to be able to do? Firstly, you need Devops capability. You need to be able to provision the infrastructure. It's all specified. We have documents covering this in far more detail than I'm going to go through on these slides. You need to be able to provision that infrastructure, monitor it 24/7, restore it if it comes down 24/7. Okay? So if you're like, well, we don't work on the weekends, it's not what we're looking for. Yeah.
So in case of a failure of running a node, what's the time you gotta restore? Like what's the RPO?
So it's offhand, I think it's in 1 hour from when you receive the notice. Okay, so we're also monitoring, and we will be sending out automated emails. And once your administrators receive it, it's expected to restore. Yeah. Also, there's requirements with respect to updates, critical updates, security updates, right? That if a CVE is being raised on the hypervisor that you're using, the OS that you're using, or the node itself. So we have one on the blockchain node, right? There was the Log4j whole kerfuffle like 6 months ago. We were sending updates, I think there were 3 or 4 updates as each new bug that got discovered in Log4j, we were releasing a new version and they needed to be being released within 3 days. And non-criticals, you have longer time to deploy them. You need to have security capabilities. Okay, so you have to have your InfoSec policies. You're probably already aligned. Most of the organizations here will already be aligned to some ISO 27001 or SOC 2. You need something like that. We need to see those, and we need to receive an attestation from your CIO or CTO or whoever happens to be your head of technology. The data center needs to have those access controls in there. Data itself needs to be, access to data needs to be being logged in your systems. You have the personnel management and training in place, and you know how to respond to CVEs that are coming in. And lastly, operationally, we need people who can be alerted and are responsive. There is this requirement to both submit forms for registering things, changes that occur, so an admin, needs to be removed from the system when they leave your organization and so on. Okay, questions about that before we move on? So the steps are as follows. Basically, we'll send you, if you're interested, all the materials. There's a legal agreement. There is, let me just swap to this slide actually first. So there's a legal agreement. You need to understand what it means to be receiving credits. And you need to get that. You need to have some sort of agreement with finance, like we don't care about them and we're going to ignore them, or we're going to account for them in some way. Yeah.
Just a quick question, language, credits, tokens, vouchers you use in this?
Okay, so tokens, I shouldn't have used it. Credits are what you're rewarded with. Vouchers are a separate.
There are prepaid access tickets to the network. It's just a purchasing process that is in alignment with how big organizations purchase things. If we would ask big organizations to have spot transactions every time they want to verify, it would be insane, right? You cannot have an HR person making decision, yes, I'm going to buy now. So essentially vouchers are prepaid. You have a centralized process that is a good fit to corporations, and these are some of the compromises you have to make.
Vouchers are prepaid credits.
Or prepaid
Verification.
Verification.
Yeah.
You essentially pay in advance 90 credits, you get a voucher, or you get
Yeah.
1,000
So you
vouchers.
can use credits to buy vouchers. That's kind of the relationship.
I got it, thank you.
All right. There is a lot of material on that you can follow up that's available, or you can have a conversation with Draw to get the nitty-gritty.
Is there any stated value of credits right now?
So all these questions about the payment and reward system, right? Let's do it offline. There's a lot to read if you want. We had a session yesterday as well. Let's Andres. I'll be happy to answer those. Okay?
But there's a lot to digest within
Yeah.
that. So, as I said, you do need to review all that, right? So this is the point of this slide only. You need to get to grips with it. You need to be comfortable with it. Your organization needs to be comfortable with what's going on here. And lastly, obviously, from a technical operations point of view, you need to get those node operator requirements. We'll also send you the policies and procedures for the Node Operating Governance Committee that I mentioned earlier, who you are essentially submitting your forms to, who are reviewing your applications, and sending it for approval to the board. The node operator, there's going to be a new operator opening in Q3 2022. Like, it's not open just yet. It's going to be decided at the board later today. And technically, operations-wise, what you need to be doing is getting a testnet node up and running as quickly as you can. So you at least from a technical perspective, get to grips with what's happening. You want to finalize things, so it means signing the stewards agreement, that legal agreement, and you finalize up on finance, and with respect to what you're doing with those rewards, and then we add you to Mainnet. Adding to Mainnet is, well, we've already talked about getting the legal agreement signed, but you need to, there's these specific steps that need to be gone through. I don't need to go over them in detail, just know that there's a process. Moshe Tzvi, who just left, he's running that to make sure you go through all these steps. And effectively, the last step is getting your node voted in as a validator, so that that node is participating in consensus and is up and working 100%. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, so in terms of deploying the node, like is there like an image or?
Yep, yeah, there's a Docker image that you get and you run that.
I'm gonna take over. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, everyone.